Well, once again, thank you very much for joining tonight's GoDaddy Pro EMEA meetup. First of all, you might see a small heart above my head. Well, this is the present for all of you. Yesterday was a Valentine's Day, and this heart is supposed to spread love and health at the same time. We hope that everyone, so this heart is going to wish that everybody actually be healthy and that we see each other in physical events soon. So today's topic is the e-com security. And our speaker is Victor Santoyo from Sucuri, who is supposed to give us outline and actually a guide how to best secure our sites and our clients' websites. So without further ado, Victor, here is your time. Thank you for joining us. And
Sure.
start.
So forgive my delay, everyone. I will try to make up for it with the time I have here. So I actually do have some resources that I'll be sharing visually. So Maya, I don't know if you would permit me to share my screen. If I could just do that on the fly here. And so the goal here is that what I want for everyone on the call to kind of take away is understanding what are some of the main, just primary questions to be asking as an organization or even as a business in terms of like what you should or should not be doing in terms of website security, right? Especially in a climate over the last few years that has evolved a lot about, keeping in compliance, the risk factors, and everything in between. So I'll share my screen here. And I'll share, in terms of some of the, the things that I have found very helpful for other e-commerce businesses over the years in terms of what websites security can look like for e-commerce. Now, for those that are on social, that's my Twitter handle, and I share a lot in terms of what are recent security issues that often do impact e-commerce, right? Working with zero-day vulnerabilities, which for those who are not familiar, end up being just very new tactics and techniques discovered in the wild that may, of course, present a risk to your business. And really, the main takeaways are going to be good security practices, the what, whys, and how this impacts, your business. And so we'll focus on this component of it. But of course, if there are any other questions specific to risks and compliance, I'd be more than happy to dive into that. Of course, as a business, what do we want? We want people visiting our web presence. We want people to feel that they have a great experience, user experience navigating through the interface of our website, make purchase processing easy, offer the best deals, or whatever the case may be in terms of what goods you're delivering. But the most important thing is you want people to trust that they can come to your website. And it's something I think most take for granted, right? How do we understand how people feel safe or take for granted the fact that they're coming to our website, expecting to be not just provided information, but take care of it? Where does that start? And really that starts with just understanding what steps you're taking with which at the end of the day as a business is what you're doing with the data that of course you're going to end up consuming for every visitor coming on your website, everyone coming to understand what goods you have to deliver for them. Now, how website security taps in is it's really about detecting and preventing the impact that cyber threats have on a business. Whether that may be someone defaces your website, so it's very visually obvious that someone has made an attempt to hack. Hey, this has been hacked by X and Y, a novice, here, or otherwise it could be very subtle. You don't even know. Attacks known as man in the middle, where someone intercepts the data being transmitted from a visitor, for example, myself on this Mac, submitting information to a retail store online, and then that information being intercepted by someone, and then them having the ability to read what ends up being very valuable information, stuff that can personally identify me and thus expose a risk to me. More importantly, of course, those types of things happen, things that are severe enough, and Google, comes down with the judgment and blacklists your site and your business. And of course, for a lot, especially when you put in the resources SEO-wise to bring up your ranking in certain keywords, this can be devastating. And so a lot of what will happen in a case like this is, of course, people don't often know what to do or how long this may take. I think most people might end up being surprised. Let's say even encountering a page like this after an infection can often be lifted within 24 to 36 hours. Not every minute counts, yes, but most do end up having a misunderstanding when working with some of the businesses I've worked with. That this may take weeks, this will take forever. And yes, there's going to be some recovery because you're impacted, right? But if you have the right plan of action and the proper response in place, this will ultimately, be something that you can, recover from fairly quickly, and get back to, the proper everydays of your business. Now, how does this happen? You have to consider some of the things that often businesses overlook, right? Sometimes I think business owners, especially as a result of the pandemic, have shifted from brick and mortar to online, right? They can't sell in person, so they have to go virtually. And a lot of what comes with that is having to learn very quickly how the online realm works, right? You have a lot of great hosts or a lot of great managed providers out there that offer website access, website builders. Okay, here's access to hosting, here's access to this SEO and plugins and themes and extensions, and you're just bombarded. And in reality, as a business person, you're just trying to get your product online. So some of the things that can ultimately be helpful in a situation like this is understanding how attackers come through. So what happens is you have email that can be compromised, your computer and your devices. So that's why it's going to be really critical thinking beyond everywhere your website touches, having antivirus software, monitoring tools to help detect potential issues, even checking and making sure your browsers that you're using to navigate are up to date. And of course, making sure the data you're receiving from your prospective customers are properly secured. And by that, I mean you have a proper, valid SSL certificate in place. And really from the beginning, from where your visitor hits on the website all the way down to your server. Without getting too much into the weeds, oftentimes people will add on CDN layers because they want to boost performance, right? You want to make sure your site loads quickly. And that's, of course, ideal, but you have to also make sure that certificates are valid in every cloud layer as well, if you have those, involved in your day-to-day. And of course, the security of your actual infrastructure, right? Making sure you have your language is up to date and all pieces of software involved. Okay. Because often, in most cases, outdated software will always be a key proponent for why these types of intrusions take place. But beyond that, of course, access, passwords, multi-factor, and all that. We'll go into some of that, but those are going to be also key things to focus on. So, what are we trying to secure? Right, like I touched on, your hosting, control panels, and all control panels that are associated with your business, right? So this is not just the site. You also may want to make sure that if you're utilizing a payment processor like Recurly or some others, you're also doing your best to create strong access into those, because any area that impacts your business, essentially is going to be responsible for some form of sensitive information that will be associated to your customers. Of course, now we're going back to your website, you're going to have a lot of other components involved, FTP or different ports that are accessing the server. Based on how large your business may be, you may consider hiring someone to make sure that they're monitoring the server for opening or closing ports that you may just never end up using. Or if you do, blocking access to only those that should have it, and then whitelisting those specific individuals. CMS management, right? Utilizing a popular framework like a WooCommerce on WordPress, Magento, making sure that those modules and components and all that are up to date as well. Of course, securing database access, running theme, right? Making sure that you're secure, only those that should have access will have access, right? You don't want people you're running your finance to have necessarily, back-end access to the server when they don't have any business needing to. And of course, making sure you're connecting through the internet in a responsible fashion. That meaning if you're connecting through, if you're going to be handling a lot of private information in a specific moment, may not be the best time to go to a public network at a cafe. There are wireless network type attacks that actually often take place where people can remotely tap into other machines that are connected to the network, or get the machine and trick them into connecting to a other hotspot that actually has nothing to do with, let's say, a Starbucks that you connect through. So if you're going to do that, make sure either at home or at your home or your office, somewhere where you know that you can have better control over the devices connecting online. Admittedly, it sounds a bit paranoid and maybe third, fourth level in terms of how these things happen, but these attacks happen and often impact businesses a lot more, especially the one where you have people connecting on different hotspots, because most of the time you'll see all kinds of common Wi-Fi guest Wi-Fis, and you're never actually sure which one's the right one. So people often guess, and sometimes they guess incorrectly. Right. Other steps we can take. You'll often find for me that the biggest thing that I always like to emphasize is going to be visibility, knowing. And the reason for that is because a lot of times we work with businesses and organizations that often just don't know what they have. They don't know how much software they're running. They don't know how many installs they've been testing and playing around with before they pushed the business online and how much they left there. And in addition to that, they often just don't know how many systems they're managing in general, right? You just know, hey, I've got bookmarks for this and that, and I just, whenever I need something, I go here, never capturing that inventory. So we phrase it as reducing the attack surface. But in the end, that just means, how do we minimize the number of access points or the risk factors involved, right? So if we're not utilizing a piece of software and we have no intention to, remove it, right? If you don't have a need to utilize a specific system anymore, but it has my name, it has my address, it may potentially be old client information, back that up, store that somewhere secure, and then close the account. Things like that. So just reducing what you have in front of you so that there's less opportunity for a potential issue, because it just takes one mistake, right? One mistake was something you forget. And so another component is your actual software for the site. Do you need a plugin? Do you need a theme? What happens when vulnerabilities are disclosed? Do you have a plan for that? Are the developers that I've hired or even developers for the software I'm downloading making any effort to prioritize security? And as well as, do they have a plan in the event that there's an update and I need to make sure that the updates I have perhaps are important security updates, don't have an impact on the functionality of my site. Oftentimes we get people who customize software because it nearly does what they needed to do, but they just mess around, some of the core files of that software just to make sure. And then comes times for a big security disclosure, that plugin needs to update, but you can't do it because you made all kinds of funky changes. So those are the kinds of questions that if you don't have answers to, maybe a good time to start reviewing for the team or yourself. I touched on, of course, outdated site elements are the number one cause for infections that we see. And at the very least, even if it wasn't the root cause, we just still see outdated software all the time. So making sure that you have updates applied are going to always be key. I think most people have a propensity to update just about everything else, right? You want to update your machines, your phones, your tablets, and all that. And most of the time, you do that because I think you're visually looking for upgrades to UI, UX, understanding, and hey, there's got to be some cool feature they're finally pushing out. But oftentimes, buried in there every time is a security update. The same should go for how the site gets managed, right? It may seem convenient, but not just for you, but for your customer base. Updating that is going to provide better assurances and lowering your risk. Now, of course, while updates are helpful, there's still risk involved regardless. So avoid utilizing software that hasn't been either properly reviewed or otherwise heavily downloaded, meaning I trust a plugin that's been downloaded 450,000 times versus 45 times, and making sure that the authors have a history, and are actively keeping up with it. Of course, I touched on reviewing not just contents, but of course, just software or folders or anything that's just not in use. If you're not going to leverage some component of something, either back it up and store somewhere off-site, like USB drives or local drives or whatnot, or just get rid of it if you have no need for it. And look, in reality, a lot of these PCI and GDPR type compliances are going to require you to, but even before those thresholds of time to expire, require you to do so, it may just be good on a regular basis to have that as good habits. Of course, limiting and monitoring access, right? I touched on someone from finance not having access to the server when they don't have a need. Similarly, just because you have sysadmins or some developer does not mean they need to be accessing all the invoices and all those types of information. So sometimes those roles mix, sometimes they don't. But if they don't, then limit access where you can. And specifically, of course, be very, I think, vigilant to remove access. If you have employees or people on your team that are moving on to other opportunities or whatever the case may be. Multi-factor, use that wherever you can. Random strong passwords, of course, at every level. I leverage LastPass personally for everything, and I have for many, many years. It makes it very easy, and I don't see a lot of accesses, or rather bad access to any of my accounts. And on a regular basis, I actually do check, because sometimes I may use a website once, not use it again, and realize I'm never going to use it. I'm going to request my account be closed there. One less password to have to manage. Use non-standard usernames, of course, for access. It's very easy for people to presume that you're going to use a initial last name situation there for your user access. And certificates, of course. This will always be key as a business. You want to always make sure your data is encrypted when you're receiving it, regardless of whether it's not just credit card information or bank account information, but as well as email addresses, phone number, even those areas. PCI and a lot of other compliance requirements will mandate you do it, but in reality, it's just a good, sensible, common sense thing to realize that you need to. Now, you can do all these things. You can action all of this and be diligent. At the end of the day, stuff still happens, and new techniques and tactics are discovered every day. So having a recovery plan in place is going to be best, as I touched on at the very beginning, because you want to make sure that if worst case scenarios occur, you know who you're reaching out to, who you're calling, who you're messaging in the middle of the night, so that you don't waste minutes or hours trying to find somebody, right? Or trying to wait for someone to call you back to quote you on what it would take to fix something like this. This is going to be the general visual that I would actually want everyone to kind of be comfortable and leave with, because this is very much a never-ending cycle for how these things happen, right? So you have a plan in place. I know when my water breaks or if the air conditioning stops working, I know exactly who I need to reach to, because no one wants to suffer, without the air blowing on a very warm summer day. But with security, sometimes most people don't, and they don't have that information and that Rolodex standby. So having that is a good first step. You have an issue, reach out to those professionals you've enlisted or you trusted to make that decision to. After that, recover, right? Take the steps to action based on what their feedback is, right? In our case, I'm part of the Security brand. We specialize in website security, and a lot of often what we do is provide, those customers with the ability to say, hey, look, this is what happened. Here are all the lists of files and directories that were impacted. These are the things you need to do to improve your security posture. So we've recovered, we put you in a good position to succeed from here. Your site was blacklisted. We've already gone ahead and requested a delist for you. It may take about 24, 36 hours. And once you get clear to that, right, and you've gone out of that and your site's back to normal, review those action items, see what you can action and how quickly you can, because there's always going to be gradual improvements made. And in reality, systems change all the time, right? Suddenly, the way multi-factor works today wasn't the way it was many years ago, right? Biometric multi-factor is very different, fingerprint scanning and all this. I'm sure that'll evolve over time as well. So just kind of always being ready to, roll with those punches are going to be critical. And of course, then mitigate, right? Make those changes. make those, those hardening techniques, put that together. Because at the end of the day, when that comes back again, you want to be able to feel like you're a business that people can trust, right? You still want those customers to come back over and over, and they may not always come back if they all of a sudden were notified that there was a breach, if they came to your site and saw that the big red screen of death, so to speak. Trust is the biggest component of all this in terms of e-commerce security. So how much you're investing in that trust is going to be just as key. And a lot of those things you'd be surprised with e-commerce businesses that have been around for years before we all shifted online due to the pandemic. Never got a lot of that, or even never knew where to start. So that's, I think, a good kickstart to the conversation, and of course I'll be open to any questions anyone may have, but I hope this was helpful and help everybody to take away something.
Wow, this is everything I can say. I have a couple of questions on my own.
Sure.
Websites that I'm maintaining, but I would first ask our audience actually to see if there are any questions from their side.
Sure.
Marco? You're on mute, so.
He's working on it, I see it.
Maybe Lisa has a question.
I don't know. But yeah, no, any questions at all? Oh, there we go.
Marco, let me hear from you.
Okay, I'm first again. Okay, but for the moment I'm doing this new German CMS software. Do you have any plans for building any plugins for them in terms of security? Because I see their logs and they really often do updates that make me signals that they are repairing bugs in the, in the fast manner, but still they have new version of, it's a software 6. So basically it's a completely new thing. So that was my question.
So in a lot of those cases, we wouldn't necessarily build out like new software to help. And I think one thing a bit more technical that I can dive into in, I think, in 90 seconds is we actually lean on what's known as a cloud-based firewall, meaning we don't install anything as to also not disrupt, how things work or function on your side. But the main key there is that all of the traffic that passes through the cloud layer on our side. And the biggest advantage and benefit is that it allows us the flexibility to make adjustments to rules or signatures that may, be required for that type of adjusting as new things come up all the time, right? If something's targeting maybe a specific language in general all the time, like PHP, maybe it's targeting a specific CMS platform, we have the flexibility to then make those changes literally in real time without having to inform the customer, hey, this is a new feature, a new rule you need to enable right away because it's something new. It's for us, it's done, and it benefits everyone involved. And it allows us a lot of flexibility in that sense. So for us, often what we'll do is just simply say, look, provided you have the coverage set up, and of course you're doing all the other, things on the margins to improve your posture, you'd be covered because it's new. In most cases, I think in 2019 and 2020, we averaged about a 94% catch rate for 0 days, meaning any new security breach or tactic that was discovered, our existing rules that were already there captured them. So it's very rare for us to actually have to go in and implement something new. And so it's, and that would be one thing. And when you do your research about a security tool or provider that is going to help you, I think that type of flexibility will help. How much legwork will be required on your part in terms of like, hey, do I have to be responsible for managing rules or creating them, new policies and a lot of jargon that may end up amounting to the same thing. So those are going to be key things to ask. And I hope that helps, and let me know if you have anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Jenny, would you have any questions?
This is going to sound rude and it's not meant to be. What's the difference between we can't even say it now, security.
Yeah.
And say word fence. Because I was recommending word fence from when I started out.
Sure, that's actually a good transition from my previous response. You know, there's going to be plugin versus cloud-based solutions that that'll always be tempting, I think, for a lot of people because it might be easier management. You're already in the WordPress interface. I mean, we offer a plugin, but it's by design just more of a visibility tool. But there's 2 points of feedback that we do normally get. A is that the word fence will often consume a lot of their own resources in order to run because it, of course, exists inside of your file structure, right? It's a plugin. Based on how much traffic your business may actually anticipate to get, that may be a factor because if you're going to be receiving, you know, hundreds of thousands or millions of visitors on a regular basis, you have to make sure you have the infrastructure to support that, but then you're going to be running a security tool that'll be scanning all of that. And there are going to be attack types that are known as volume-based that essentially are designed to try and override your resources. So if you've got security layers at that level already kind of cannibalizing your own CPU usage and all that, that's oftentimes what we get. It's like, hey, WordFence works okay, but man, what really kills me is when performance dies. Because the moment we see traffic spike or some moderate level of attack comes through, nothing works like it should. Whereas we are cloud-based, we completely offset that load. A lot of security vendors these days actually as well, if they're cloud-based, will incorporate what's known as a CDN, right? Cloud Delivery Network to optimize performance, as we do as well. So there's going to be a lot of those like similar themes will be hit. And that's also a good benefit, right? In terms of being able to get your site faster out to certain regions or countries that you otherwise would not have because, you know, you're still kind of limited to your host and where their presence is. So for us on WordFence, it's really about performance and as well as the ability to, again, you know, how quickly those rules can come out, depending on the version of WordFence you have. I know with the free version, those new rules for new tactics that come out, I think are delayed 30 days versus if you're premium. So there's going to be a lot of different things. And we actually do have a comparison table that may help, at least specific to us. But in reality, it's also kind of a good cloud versus plugin, you know, evaluation that you can make in terms of, you know, whether it's WordFence or us or, you know, let's say other security solutions out there like iThemes or whatnot that are helpful. But I hope that helps.
Yeah, can you pop that link in the chat if you don't mind?
Absolutely, yes, I can pull it up.
Thank you very much.
Any other question? Or I should start shooting my own?
It's up to you. I'm actually posting the link here now to everyone.
Okay, before everyone actually gets a second question or another one, I want to ask you, I'm using Sucuri, for instance, for my blog, and I do have a philosophy that each morning there are a couple of things that I need to do. First of all, I do a security test on your security page test. And this is what I do every morning, just to be sure that everything is okay on my website. For instance, this is because I have a Sucuri plugin, but what about those who are using some other plugins? Would they be able to use the test page of Sucuri to check the health status of the website?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, in fact, actually, we do offer a plugin that's free to use that does the same. It kind of offers the same thing. It's a remote scan that gives you a daily check on whether there is known defacements or other things like that. It does not get in the way or is very resource heavy at all. But if let's say you wanted to make it as part of your routine, which is a very good thing to do, then utilizing our what's known as site check tool, sitecheck.sucuri.net, I'll pop that URL in here in the chat as well, is a good way to give you some good, I think, guidance, because it also offer hardening improvements or otherwise things that may be helpful in terms of like are certain or certain things enabled on the server or whatnot that should be. And in a lot of cases, they will often come up when audits come up. So getting ahead of that early will help because then you're not under a deadline or at the risk of paying fines and fees and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely a good help, and I'll pop in the link here.
Sure. Maybe Jenny already asked you this question, but I wanted to ask, I mean, is there a difference in choosing the security plugin for an e-com and then a very small website like a blog post website with 10 articles on it? I'm talking about cost effectiveness, right? Because the plugin costs
Sure.
the same, right? So
Yep.
what would you advise for different type of clients, like the complex clients and the smaller ones?
So I think one of the things I would highlight for smaller, site owners, is going to be making sure that those free tools, do exactly what you need them to do, but also don't create an additional burden. And I'm not trying to, harp on a dead horse or anything, but like a plugin tool like a WordFence, I would do your homework to make sure, hey, if I do enable something like this, will this work? And will this actually maybe cause a negative impact somewhere else? In addition, like if you're going to, let's say, lean on free resources, like checking our public or site check tool or whatnot, or whatever other fashions you're going to make security habits, is that going to take away time from other stuff I need to be doing? How often do I need to be checking? So I think always that the pros and cons, of understanding what you get in return in terms of what you're going to be utilizing will be helpful. But if you're going to go for a smaller site and you don't want to be spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars because you cannot, what you need to get done, I would always make sure that whatever you're going to get, does it have the ability for you to monitor for changes, monitor and give you a full list of things that you have and what you can change, because oftentimes that'll be the most helpful. Not every tool does that, and not every tool will be as diligent, right? Like some tools like ours can do it several times a day, some maybe once a day. So then, being like understanding how comfortable you are in terms of waiting to respond or waiting to know if there's an issue with your site. It's also going to be a good question to be asking internally. In addition, do those services or do those tools offer an ability for you to go to them for a premium service to resolve them? Because some tools just do that. They tell you what the issue is, but then leave you there. Other tools may offer, hey, but if you do have an issue, you can upgrade to get it resolved, for our team to remediate or otherwise remove those issues. That will also be key because, again, that's less time, less conversation. Great. I know that if I have an issue, I can just work with this group and then continue on to get improvements. And in terms of protection, there are lots of cool tools for this. But at the end of the day, you're going to want something that'll help you monitor for access, meaning how many times you're being alerted to someone trying to access, let's say on WordPress, your WP admin. Making sure that you do have multi-factor provisions in place in different spots. In reality, utilizing that along with very good password, I would say password posture, or just exercising good habits on that front will often alleviate a lot of issues, because a lot of times we'll get people who are known infected. Their hosts tells them, hey, look, you were going to shut the site down in the server down in 3 days if you don't get this resolved. And they give us access to the root of their server, and the password is all but 6 characters and a word and a number. So that already is already a good indication that they weren't practicing a lot of good security habits. It may be inconvenient. Yes, security is very rarely anything to be convenient about, but it will often pay dividends. And I can attest to this from the years when I started utilizing LastPass everywhere, which I utilize on my phone and my browser and whatnot. That often that inconvenience just goes away because it just becomes part of what you do. And you understand that, hey, look, this is certainly something I do not want to have to keep checking back on. But then the next day you read about that a store or a bank service has had a breach that may have impacted the information I had. So what if that was something as a result that I did? Or otherwise, if I didn't have multi-factor to alert me, someone was trying to access that information, but they couldn't get in the first place. So my 2 cents on that in terms of making sure what you need to be looking for in terms of free tools. And I think the key thing will always be someone who can at least provide you a premium add-on to help actually extend beyond what they offer.
Any more questions coming from the audience, or we should continue with my questions?
Okay.
I'm very security, how to say, aware person. I'm trying.
Oh, I love it. No, I love it.
I love
I could
it.
speak on that on this.
Grant, would you have a question regarding the
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So at the moment, I'm using a combination of WordFence with neck. I forgot what it's bloody called now. Cloudflare.
Sure.
And so obviously all traffic's proxying through Cloudflare and going to the site that way. I've not used your product yet, so I'm kind of assuming it replaces, or Cloudflare would sit in front of your product, is it? And then your product would proxy onto the server?
That's precisely right. We also function in the same Anycast type of overall network that they utilize as well. I would differentiate us in pretty much the easiest way in that a lot of what drove, of course, their early success was because a lot of their stuff was performance driven, right? And I think a lot of their WAF capabilities have been more evolved over the last few years.
Yeah.
We were the other way around. We started security first, and our CDN was second, and everything we usually drive towards improving has always been with security first in mind. Does not mean, though, that both can't work in tandem. We have many organizations that leverage us both because, Cloudflare may offer a certain minification type and, feature or things specific to performance, whereas we offer a lot of less overhead or work involved in creating policies and rule sets and things of that nature, right? And it helps on both fronts. So there's an opportunity to use us both to replace them in terms of performance. I think in most regions we are either neck and neck or the same. And I think in reality, what I would even offer to you, if you wanted to reach out to me directly, is an opportunity to just test it to see with or without, what it looks like with us behind Cloudflare, which is actually ideally how we would fit in. And then if you don't notice anything in terms of performance, which of course will always be key, then from a security perspective, then you're in a good spot. But yeah, and it'd be a similar thing, although from a setup perspective, we do differ in that we don't require, let's say, full management of your name servers. It's only an A record change. Yeah, that's really it.
Yeah. Could I just also ask in regards to, so say for instance you were using Cloudflare proxying to you guys, and then obviously that's then the servers handling that. How do you, or what's your stance on direct attacks on the server? Because obviously, somebody knows my actual physical server's IP, and they're coming direct to that rather than proxying through any DNS records that may be published. How do you kind of handle that side of things?
So when utilizing our product, the big thing we utilize or I recommend enabling is what we call bypass prevention. The basic premise there is that you lock down those ports of the server, basically deny all, and only permit from our limited IP ranges, so that that, of course, any traffic that hits the server directly cannot, and if it's going to hit the website, it has to have been funneled through us. So that's realistically the way we work through that, and it's helped a lot of others in the past. And I would honestly say too, like, just port visibility in general is good, because if you have ports, we have people who have leave ports open and never use them. If that's a situation that you may find yourself in, close them, right? You don't have a reason to keep them open necessarily, because you may find yourself under a flood, under different TCP or UDP protocols or whatnot. But yeah, so that will be our approach, right? And when utilizing a cloud service, it would be the same thing. Try to get a handle for what those ranges are that you're taking advantage of, and then just only permit access to those ranges at the
that's kind of it is what I've got set up at the moment. But I'm kind of my background is IT for 15 years, so I'm always kind of a belt and braces person, which is why kind of I suppose it slightly worries me not having something physically on the server on top of just blocking all traffic apart from the allowed IP that you're expecting the traffic to come on.
Yeah, for us, it's always been, I think, just honestly the most straightforward thing, because in most cases, like there's a similar approach we take actually that's more day to day, where we have options on our WAF that say lock down the WP admin or your login areas to anyone that's only permitted on, let's say, the whitelist on the interface that we give people access to. Then we have an API that you can bookmark in the event that, say, you change or your ISP changes IPs for some reason, and then you can re-permit access. Because the last thing you want then in those cases as well is that, again, it's that thing where you have people connecting remotely from office or public areas. Those are also going to, that's why when you're going to do something important, never do that, because if, let's say you did that and then you whitelisted your IP in a spot like that, you've whitelisted that IP, you leave the cafe, but other people are going to connect through there, right? So it's not just simply about doing stuff like that. It's also situational. If you're going to do something like that, do it somewhere you feel safe about, or at the very least, when you go somewhere public and you whitelist yourself or your machine or your IP, right, that you then immediately remove that as soon as you leave. Those are other like secondary things that people often miss. Like, oh yeah, I need to get access to my account. Let me just whitelist this thing, permit it. Never thinking, will I come back to this? And if not, please deny access again. Those often end up being those vectors, that come through and all that. But anyway, but for some, I'm paranoid. For my friends,
Cool,
certainly.
thanks.
For others like us in the weeds of it, very critical, right? The risk involved in all that.
Cool, thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions? Or I should ask a very difficult one, which is...
I love difficult questions.
Oh, you like the difficult? Here's the one, and I'm sure everybody's going to like it. How do you explain the security importance and the cost to the potential client? Because you're going to talk to him about many different security things, from SSL certificate to different plugins to different firewalls. The client is a baker. He has no idea what you want to actually sell him, but his friend is telling him that you want to rip him off. So...
And I would tell the baker in that situation that a lot of times what they don't think about is that, legally in most areas, right, you're required to purchase hazard or fire insurance, right? Because of a potential issue that may go wrong. No one likes paying it, but you have to. The difference is people don't often think that the people are not mandated to purchase security, but something may go wrong. And so what you're investing in when you do something like that is insurance specific to cyber threats. It's the 21st century, and we're moving a lot online, and those brick and mortar shops that used to pay different forms of insurance for, whether it may be for floods or for fires or other hazardous situations, maybe those get lifted because now you're working from home, but now you've got a different type of insurance you need to invest in because other threats lay there. So I tell them, look, you never want to have to pay for all the damages a fire may cause if you never had the insurance. No one does. If your automobile gets into an accident, but you didn't have the insurance covering you to some extent, that becomes very, very pricey. Same thing happens. And the consequences are much more beyond financial when it comes to your website, because if you don't have a proper security process or a vendor, a lot of requirements require you have a security solution in place or web application firewall, as they're known. You can get fines for that. And beyond that, of course, it's the time, the reputation you're losing from your brand. So to me, it's an insurance equivalent, but it's just you're tackling a different hazard. And you don't want to pay out of pocket if you didn't have already something in place because of everything that comes with that. And I think for most, it resonates in that sense. Most people are not, look, and even as web developers and for other managed hosts or agencies that I work with, they're not security experts. And I think a lot of times they don't pretend to be. And they'll tell you, look, we're not. And I think as someone speaking to a client working on their e-commerce website, I would tell that client, look, I'm not an expert on this, and I'm not going to try to be, and I'm not going to spend my hours in the event of a crisis where I may be trying to get myself on vacation on holiday somewhere with my family to try and fix this. when we could spend just this much, either per year or per month, to make sure we always have someone on standby who can do this for us, right? Usually works, but of course everyone's different. Some people are stubborn, but at least that to me is the easier message to articulate.
Sure. Well, I'm sure everybody's facing the same the same problem of actually not upselling, but selling the right thing to the right client, right? Because
Exactly.
I don't think that from a perspective of a client, the responsibility of a website developer or designer closes with submitting the website to the client itself, because just a day after that, the security attack could happen, and then is a big question whose responsibility this is. So
Precisely right. Yeah, I think being transparent about that as well is really key. You know, whose responsibility, or who's capable, right? Like I can only do so much, and you're going to hold me responsible, but I want this clear from the beginning that I cannot do this on my own, and making that clear so that everyone understands from the beginning. May not opt for this, but when a fire starts, you have to understand my limitations, and what we can do in those spots.
Correct. Are there any more questions related to e-commerce security? Well,
I have one, if I can ask.
it's
Yeah, as I heard, Sucuri mostly provides its service to WordPress users and WooCommerce users. Do you have any services to provide for the like startups which don't use WordPress or other kinds of CMS? They just
Certainly, yes. We support any technology. It doesn't have to be any traditional CMS platform. We have people running on maybe things like Cold Fusion, on Microsoft, ASP, custom frameworks and whatnot. We support them. We've supported them all over the years. Have a lot of familiarity with some of those niche situations, as I'll say. But yes, I don't want you to feel concerned. We have to work with a specific platform. In reality, our base requirement is simply as long as you would permit us the ability to modify an A record to point the traffic and pull that through us. That is all we would need in terms of being able to set up protection for your site.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, now I'm on mute. So that's very interesting. We have more questions. We could easily start to conclude this meeting. First of all, next week, next Monday, we're going to be answering a security question. I was hacked. What is next? So we will go through this painful process of mental and physical stress that, God forbid, any of you goes through with your own websites or your clients' websites when it comes to who you need to call or what is the next step you need to do. And it's going to be very interesting. Josh is going to take us on this very stressful road, but it will be okay. So don't worry about it. Maybe it will sound maybe it will be a bit nervous at the beginning, but later on, I mean, it's a stress that security is a stress in general. So especially if you get hacked. So that's one of the things we're going to be talking next week. If you want, I can actually drop a link to this event just in case you might want to look at it. If you guys would like to talk on any other topic regarding the security, please let me know. Also, I wanted to let you know that during the month of March, we're going to be talking about automation. And month of April will be committed to marketing as well, best marketing tools. So if those would be of your interest, then get ready for a very hot 2 months before we enter the WordCamp EU preparations and before actually we start creating the biggest event and contributing to WordPress. In the meantime, please contribute to WordPress. I'm doing that every week for myself. I hope you guys are doing the same thing and making this community wonderful. And I can only wish you all the best. And until we see next time, keep your website security.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
See you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.